What the title Heaven to Homeboy means is that when I paint, I see myself in sort of a transcendental state, in sort of a. It's not sort of, it is a transcendental state. It's me shedding my backbones, my skin, everything, and putting my soul into paint and letting my spirit live on beyond my physical body. And that's all I'm trying to show. And that's all I think other very high up people are trying to show. Um, so basically, it's like, Earth to Homeboy, hey, 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 you know, when really that's exactly it. Don't get in the way of that, you know. Stop getting in the way of this thing that's happening. And people are trying to get in the way because they think that that's wrong or something, but that's exactly what they shouldn't be doing. And so, unfortunately, I have to ignore people who try to, you know, get in the way of that. And they don't really understand it themselves because they're not doing that themselves. And so they want to understand, which I understand. I've been there. Excuse me. um, that's pretty much what it is. I mean, it's just that simple. You know, I'm in heaven, and it's like most people's reaction to that would be like, "No, you're not. Like you're still alive." It's like exactly, exactly. That is the point. Which it generally takes a lot of time to accept that and to fully grasp it because you can easily say, well, you did this, you did that. It's like, okay, yeah, sure, but I also did this. And you're missing the point here. You know? If you don't want to be with me in heaven, then, I mean, if it makes you feel more comfortable that I'm in hell, that sucks, but I guess you can feel that way if you want to. It's going to take you a lot longer to understand why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling. You know, do you deserve that? I think most people would say, okay, yeah, you deserve that. I'm kind of the opposite of that. I try to help understand the reasons why people think that way and shift that because I see myself in that also. It's like, if somebody pushes me out of sync, generally I would get angry about that. However, I want to bring it back around, not just help them see, hey, you pushed me off the ledge here or whatever, you pushed me out of sync, but and not just have that karma there, but just let it do its thing. I've always had that within me. I've never really retaliated to people because I know that they're going to get their karma one way or another. I don't have to do anything about it. They're going to hurt themselves. They don't really, understand what they're doing here. Not that I really fully understand what I'm doing. I'm just experimenting, really. I'm trying to experience these things while I'm able to. And, generally that does bring on a lot of negative emotions in other people. Not in myself, but in me releasing those. And, it's okay to feel that way. But please, I challenge you to understand why you're thinking that way and maybe take a step back and think, okay, whoa, I was jealous or I was very envious. And what can I do to not feel that way? What can I do to feel that way? So yeah, circling back around, that's pretty much what Heaven to Homeboy is about, which might not seem like it's that deep of a title. It might seem kind of almost controversial, I would say, because I did feel a little bit uncomfortable saying heaven because I don't have religion. I am bringing on a lot of, this guy doesn't even have religion. How is he able to, talk about things that we talk about? That's not how that works. And it's like, yeah, it is. It is how that works. That's all I'm showing you, that you don't need to go to church to worship. You don't need to go to read a book to understand these things. It's within you already. You don't need to necessarily learn these things. I mean, it helps you understand them, to see the teachings of others and masters, and it certainly does enhance that experience. But I think it's important to also show that you don't need any of that. You can regrow what was already there, because that's how they did it themselves. All that stuff wasn't there before, and they had to figure it out themselves. So who's to say we can't do that again? Now, we shouldn't take that away, in my opinion. Photographs of old memories of people who aren't around anymore, I think it is worth keeping those. I do think that. I mean, there's limited space in the material world, but it's a tough one to swallow. Tough one, because you gotta let go of those things. But I do think that there is a history that needs to be maintained and enhanced. And when I say maintained, it's not keeping the same old tradition of people who lived hundreds of years ago, who lived in a completely different world than we did. I think it's good to understand where they came from, but it's also good to understand where you come from, and not just in like, I'm from this city sense. It's from, what emotion are you coming from? What environment, what type of environment are you coming from, and what are your surroundings like, and things of that nature. And so that's also something that sort of encompasses that, is, I'm surrounded by homeboys. I am a homeboy myself. I'm surrounded by heaven also, if you want to say heaven. Anything similar to that. I mean, it's just simplified it down so that more people could understand where I'm coming from. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Got a lot deeper than I thought it would this morning, but yeah, and that's exactly what it was about. It's really easy to zone out and like totally shut out the world, and then you forget. That's part of it, pretty much, is zoning out and just totally forgetting that the rest of the world is still here. We're still good. I wasn't totally ignoring everybody. I was, in a state of drowning everything else out, which I think is necessary to reach those states of consciousness and achieve the things that I need to achieve to do my art. Not just my art, like, my physical states, like in running. That's, a lot of that ties into each other, is, running and art. It's going out and achieving a physical best, it is sort of a high that I'm trying to achieve, but not always. I have to, bring it back a little bit and build up. I can't just constantly be at max capacity. It doesn't work that way. I wish it would, but if it were, then we would constantly be in a plateau state, and that's not very exciting, is it? It's not very human. It's not great. It doesn't feel good. However, this other way, it doesn't really feel good always either. But that's the point. Also, is you gotta You have to go through those things to get to those states. And when you're ready, when you've gone through all those layers of emotions, you'll just know that that's the time to do that, and to unfold everything that you were and everything that you are now into the future. A baton, if you will. And maybe I don't like to look at it directly. I like to kind of look at it off to the side so that it's more of a hint type of thing. But I really should look at it a little bit more directly, face it directly, because there's certainly other bits of my work where I face that directly, because I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, is there's like a fear of saying the wrong thing and having your words misinterpreted. And I think a lot of people have a message and it's not necessarily a good one. However, how do we differentiate between, the good ones and the bad ones? And you got to understand that the people that do have a message, generally they do have a good one somewhere. So if they have one bad one, it's not necessarily worth throwing them away. It is kind of worth sifting through and figuring out, okay, wait a second, this one sucks, but this one's actually really, really good. And that, it's in my work too. A lot of the pages in my books probably aren't going to resonate with a lot of people. You're probably not quite at the right age or at the right maturity level. Maybe you never will be. Maybe you just never are going to experience those things that I experienced. And that's perfectly okay, because I come from a different time, you see? And that's how I'm transcending that and ridding, my soul of my physical body. It's moving on into the future, into heaven, if you will. It's, it doesn't get much higher than that. And I feel really, really great to be able to cover a topic like that in my lifetime. And it might make some people slightly uncomfortable and think that's not resonant with who I know. Exactly, though. I've hidden this part of myself from the world because I don't do things like go to church, and I don't worship in front of people, and I don't necessarily like to say Lord's name in vain. I don't like to do these things, and sometimes I sin, sometimes I do the wrong thing, sometimes I kind of let myself wean off of these things, and it might seem a little bit counterproductive and against the grain sometimes. Like, an easy example is like sugar. Like, I'll say one day I'm trying to not eat sugar, but then all right, I'm craving. I gotta have a little bit of sugar just to dial it back a little bit, and then eventually I am able to get over those little humps and get back to a better place. It all sort of goes back to normal after a while, so you just have to not stress about it. It's the most important thing that I've come to realize, is the more you stress about it, the less it's going to boil over well for you. So especially when you get the opinions of other people, they're going to say this and that about it. But what's the point of stressing about that at all? Because even though they sort of knock you off your tracks, and it's all in my mind. See, like, you see how I'm messing up my words there? That's other people, but it's really just me. It's really my own mind. But really, people do think that way. It's in my own mind. I have something there that, like, I know people are going to react that way. And so I try to counteract it in some way, and a lot of times that messes me up. I stress out about it. I don't try to, it happens. And you shouldn't stress out about your stressing out either, It's a normal reaction to the, hardships of the world and the difficulties of things. And sometimes, people are given difficulties in this world because they deserve it. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that they have the ability to get over that and to show people, hey, like, you have it a lot easier than you realize. You can handle a lot more than you think that you can handle. Typically, in every single person, is what I've experienced. Most people can handle a lot more than they think. And they try to not overdo it, which makes sense. But that typically breeds a lot of greed in people, and they don't understand that they should be more giving to people who really genuinely put a real effort into what they're doing, because those are the people that do actually deserve that, and they're not going to be greedy with what they have. They're going to be giving. And a new word that I found recently is Kumara, which, forgive me, I forget the origins. You can Google it and find the origins yourself. I encourage people to discover these things for themselves. So I guess I'm not really going to stress about that, to be honest. What that means is, like, not necessarily how much money and wealth that you're bringing in, but how much you're putting out, I think there is sort of a degree of individuality that needs to be there. Not entirely, though. I think there should be quite a bit more giving than taking, but there's not really a perfect way to measure that, I think. And people like to break people down, this little part and that little part, and that messes up a lot of things. As soon as something good happens, a lot of times people like to break it down so that they can get a little piece of it themselves. And so generally that's how you know you did a good job, is when it breaks down. So if that gives you a little bit of peace. Which, yeah, really deceives a lot of people that really did good, because, like I just said, when you do a good job, people generally tear it down and try to figure out each and every little microscopic part about it, but there's no point in doing that. Just let it be, let it do its thing. There's, stop ruining what's good. And I think the world likes to do that, and I'd like to encourage the world to maybe step back and let the good be good. And also let the bad be bad, because they're going to figure out eventually that they wasted a lot of time doing that. I mean, not necessarily. Maybe it's necessary for a little bit of bad to be there for people to see that that's what that is. However, it's still a waste of time. And you could be doing these better things. I mean, failure is certainly part of it. You're not going to succeed unless you fail. I'm sorry. That's something that people need to accept a little bit more. Especially now, today's society, it's horrible. People think that you need to be all perfect and dressed nice and make a certain amount of money and all these things, and then all of a sudden all these other things are going to fall into place. I'm sorry, that's never going to happen. So it really bothers me a lot to see that, how prevalent that is in most people in society anymore. It's really, I'm going to be bold here and say that it's really taken down the likelihood of me reproducing. Not because of myself so much. I mean, I'm weird, sure, but I certainly am not perfect, Not the greatest specimen of all time. In certain aspects I might be, but you'll never know that unless you figure it out yourself. Take the time to see through those imperfections. Who's to say, really? But what I'm saying is that it really is other people, it's a pick and choose between both sides. You pick a person to share that love with and pass that baton on to the next generation. And who you do that with really matters, because that's part of the DNA. You know, you're splitting yourself in half and making half of you into the future, and it's not really you, it's a whole new person. You can't control that person, you know. And I think that's something that I've struggled with personally, is that a lot of the people in my family like to try to control things and make you a certain way so that it benefits them, when really they need to stop doing that. They need to let go, because I will give back to them. Because they do deserve it, but you can't. The more you try to force that out of me because you do deserve it, the less you're actually going to be deserving of that. Is what they need to start to understand. But again, I can't control them. I wish that they would stop drinking so much alcohol and quit wasting money on stupid shit, bad food and alcohol, like I said, and, but again, I can't control what they do, what their behavior is. I can't really control that. I can only offer them a perspective, and hopefully they'll readjust over time, and that's the best I can do, and to listen to them and to have them listen to me has been the hardest thing in the whole world. Most people don't like to hear me. Most people don't understand what I'm saying. Most people probably didn't even get this far in the video. That's why I kind of feel a little bit more comfortable saying that later on in the videos, because I know most people probably didn't get this far, and they probably thought it was really annoying and boring or whatever. Didn't quite resonate with them, with where they're at in this moment in time. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of emotions all wrapped up in one. But that's precisely it. It's like, hey, I hear you knocking through that phone like, oh, so you're going crazy again. And it's like, listen, hear me out. Okay?